Well, former President Trump's endorsement wasn't enough for Charles Herbster to win the Republican nomination in Nebraska, the governor's race, rather. But it does seem to have paid off for a Congressman Alex Mooney in West Virginia's Republican House primary. So Caitlin Huey-Burns has been watching the races for us, and she's joining us now from Capitol Hill. Good morning, Caitlin. So, in Nebraska, he picked a challenge candidate, let's say. What does the gubernatorial primary in Nebraska tell us about former President Trump's influence, if anything, considering, the candidate that he backed had all kinds of allegations, that he was fighting?
That's exactly right. Good morning. Well, it was finally primary season. I was up late last night watching these results come back in. And so let's start with Nebraska. We've been looking to see kind of what the power and strength of Trump's endorsement in these Republican primaries is going to be. In Nebraska's governor's race, he endorsed Herbster, as you mentioned. He was facing several sexual misconduct allegations. Trump went to Nebraska to campaign for him, held a rally, not only defending him against those accusations, but also saying that Herbster was maligned, that he was a great guy, really sticking up for him against those allegations. And Herbster really ran the Trump playbook. He has been a longtime supporter of the former president and was really leaning into that in the hopes of getting through this crowded Republican primary. But the outgoing governor in Nebraska, Republican, who's term limited, supported the eventual winner, Jim Pillett. And you had this really interesting dynamic where you had the power of Trump's endorsement versus the power of the outgoing governor. And that's something I think to watch here as we're watching governor's races versus congressional races. In governor's races, it's much more local. I mean, we just went through the pandemic. We realize how important governors are to your everyday life. And they're able to go out there and say, look, this is what I'm doing. If you have the backing of the current governor, that could essentially be something of a seal of approval for the things that you want to do. So that's a dynamic to watch here. But certainly this news from Nebraska delivering the first blow to Trump's endorsement power of the 22 campaign.
So while that Trump-endorsed candidate in Nebraska did not win, Trump's pick to fill a House seat in West Virginia did win his primary. That was a really interesting race, Caitlin, because you had two incumbent Republican congressmen battling for a seat because they had lost a seat due to the census.
Yeah, this is a super interesting dynamic. So because of the census, and this happens every, 10 years, that we have redistricting, and sometimes incumbents are drawn into the same district. So that's exactly what we had here. You had an incumbent in Mooney and an incumbent running against him, and the person who won was the one endorsed by Trump. And he went to campaign for him. He really supported him. And what's so fascinating about this race, guys, is that the incumbent who lost voted for the infrastructure bill, that bipartisan bill. And what's fascinating here is West Virginia is a state that takes a lot of federal money. You would think, back in the old days, it used to be that if you were able to go back to your district and say, look, I got a road and a bridge and some projects for us. That's what I've been doing in Congress. This is what I'm delivering for you. That used to be something that would help get you elected or reelected. That used to be something that endeared you to your constituents. That, in this race, became a liability. Trump bashed him, and in the candidate that he was supporting, who voted against the infrastructure bill, they were calling the other candidate a Republican in name only. They were going after him for that vote. And so that shows kind of where Republican politics are at this point, and also raises questions for other Republicans who may have been supporting items on Biden's agenda. Remember when we were talking about the infrastructure bill, reporting on it from right here, not only Joe Manchin supported it, but Shelley Moore Capito, the Republican senator from West Virginia, supported it too. She was one of the lawmakers really in that fight on infrastructure, trying to get, trying to have a say in that bill. The politics, though, in the Republican Party right now, at least in West Virginia, and what that says for candidates across the country, sends a big signal.
All right, Caitlin, thank you very much.